Welcome everybody. I know you're all going to have to be in bed by 8:30, so we need to get done by 8 so that the people in this building can go home. So we're going to get started on time. I didn't see anybody at the table outside. Hopefully they'll get the message with the chair in front of the door to go down to that door to come in. But it's great to see a full house and then some for this. Didn't know for sure how many people were concerned about something so arcane as boards and commissions, but apparently it is an important issue for a lot of people. There were at least, I think, 24 people by my count from Dubuque County who serve on a state board or commission. I don't think that includes the advisory committees necessarily. And we invited each one of them to come tonight and tell us what the impact of the governor's recommendations are going to be on their work. So that's the main purpose of tonight, is for public input, to hear from you about what you think of the recommendations. I'd like to introduce a couple other people who are going to be on the listening panel with me. By the way, State Representative Chuck Eisenhart, State Representative Lindsey James, State Senator Janice Weiner of Johnson County. Senator Weiner is going to speak for maybe 10 minutes or so, giving you an overview of the recommendations. She served on the Boards and Commissions Review Committee that met, what, twice, 3 times total? Only.
More than that, but
in public they only met 2 or 3 times?
Yeah.
And so preparing a what, how many 100 pages report. And so there's really little opportunity. There was one kind of a public hearing, very little opportunity for statewide input on the recommendations. So it's really not our goal or our charge tonight. Plan tonight is to pontificate on what we think is in the report. We'll try to respond to issues that are raised at the end if possible. So just to kind of orient people to the format, after Senator Weiner speaks, we're going to invite people up here for, how many people here would like to speak? Okay. And I bet you there's going to be that many more motivated to speak before we're done. So why don't we say 3 minutes or so for each speaker to tell us, give us your views. And if we run out and we still have time, we can have more of an open discussion, maybe respond to some of the issues and questions that are raised. As you came in, there was a postcard with my smiling, yes, I am smiling face on the front. It's very hard for me anymore to predict how many people will show up and how many trees to kill with handouts. Normally I end up taking a lot of paper home. So rather than do that, I actually create these QR codes where you can go online to get the documents that are relevant to the discussion. So on the right is a link to the recommendations. It'll take you to the page where there's a number of links, but the whole multi-100 page report can be found here. On the other side is a link to a recent newsletter of mine where, among other things, I printed kind of like the news release that we put out about this event to kind of provide a little overview of the recommendations and what we hope to accomplish tonight. So you can go there as well. Sorry, sisters, if you don't have your cell phones with you. We're going to try to give you as much detail here at the front end as we can. So with that, we'll just jump right into it. Senator Weiner, would you be willing to come up and give us an overview of the work that the committee did? And feel free to give us a little bit of your perspective on maybe what we should think about it.
Are we using the mic or just?
That mic is not live.
Okay.
By the way,
where do you want me to stand?
You can just stand right here. I think that's from one of the TV stations. As you can see, we have multimedia present. So assume everything you say is on the record. And the reason I say that is because one of those cameras is somebody I invited to be here to record the whole proceeding. And our plan is to make it available to all state senators and representatives around the state as part of our deliberations on the bill we expect to come out of the committee's recommendations.
So, well,
So
thanks.
no swearing, please.
Thanks for having me. I'm wearing a mask because I'm sort of feeling a little under the weather, and I would really like not to share it with any of you. So I'll not wear it while I'm talking, but otherwise that's why I'm asking. So you're probably aware that where this came from was the big state government reorganization bill that the Republicans ran during the session, like the 1,600-page bill, which of course had no mistakes in it, right? But the charge with respect to this was to create this Boards and Commissions Review Committee, which I referred to as the Committee on Committees, to review the 256 or however many boards and commissions that exist in the state, and decide which ones should go. I mean, there's clearly some that are moribund, haven't met in a long time. Which ones should stay, which ones should be combined. And that all sounds great. They first met in June, and we met more or less once or maybe twice a month toward the end. The idea sounds great. The process itself, from my perspective, was deeply flawed. If we're looking at it from a point of view of transparency, and having Iowans' voices heard, because one of the wonderful things about the boards and commissions is it's a chance for people to serve on their state government, to make use of their expertise, and to really have voice. So the 4 out of the 6 active voting members report directly to the governor. There was a public member and one other, and then there were 4 of us who were ex officio. And because these bills have been run through the state government committees in the House and the Senate, those of us who were the ex officio folks are members of that committee in our respective house. So it was, for the Democrats, it was me and Adam Zabner, oddly enough, like the two people from Iowa City. And then the Republicans were Jane Bloomingdale, and I'm going to forget his name, but he's from Western Iowa, and he showed up for the first meeting and then never showed up again, which is sort of probably why I'm forgetting. But he runs the state government committee in the Senate.
Jason Schultz, was it?
Yeah, Jason Schultz. Thank you. So what they did is they sent us these lists, these massive lists of all the boards and commissions, and then at the first meeting they divided it up into these little tiny subcommittees, which were not big enough to require any notification under the public meetings laws. So it was never clear to me, anyway, how they solicited, if they solicited at all, really, despite what Director Paulson claimed, from these various boards and commissions, what the information that they needed to carry out their task. But so they had these multiple subcommittees, and we never knew what they did. And eventually they came out with this set of recommendations, and we all looked at it and said, so, okay, where did that come from, and could you please have some public comment? Because I'll bet Iowans would really like to give you their opinion on this. Although, I mean, the other thing was that it took place over the summer, right, when a lot of people are on vacation, and for some reason the law had required that the recommendations be completed by September 30th, even though we are not obviously in session until next week. So it was a compressed timeline. So the second part of it, when they had their second set of subcommittee meetings, I formally asked, please let me know when these various subcommittees are meeting, because I would like to attend as many as I can just to see how this is working. I never heard a peep. They probably weren't very happy with me because I was sort of calling them out in their public meetings, but politely, right? But this belongs to Iowans. So they did have on September 6th a public comment meeting where they had over 2 hours of public comment, which was really impressive given who was paying attention, who knew what was going on over the summer, who even knew this was taking place. And I would say that the 3 main issues, in addition to a couple of extra recommendations they made, were licensure for various professions, and public safety, because there are a lot of these that deal with things like elevator safety or boiler safety, and you really would like your boiler not to blow up and your elevator not to get stuck between floors, right? So you want to have qualified people following that. And as I said, having a voice, particularly those who they lumped into the Human Rights Commission, Latinos, Asian Americans, and Pacific Americans. They also tried to include deaf Iowans in that. They did successfully fight back against that, and they are now together with the people who oversee hearing aids, instead of lumped together with these other groups. As you've probably heard, the recommendations by the numbers started with 256. They consolidated like 144 of them, and it was intended to end up with about 111. That's like a huge reduction. So my view, and what I also said to them publicly, was, yes, let's do a review, but let's do a thorough review and give people time and the material they need to know what's going on and to comment. For example, and I'll give you a few examples of things that were cut or consolidated. The ones that struck me the most were bills that we had literally just passed that last spring. One they've been working on for a long time. One had to do with hairdressers and barbers. Another with interior design, the serious industrial interior design. And a third one was midwifery. I mean, they were the subject of intense negotiation to get them right. And the legislature had just passed them, and the governor had just signed them. So the way the process is going to work, though, is everybody will get another bite at the apple. I just don't really know what it's going to look like, because the Committee on Committees doesn't have any final say. They made their recommendations. You have the QR code to get to that. And the Legislative Services Agency was tasked with drafting the law that we will all see this session at some point, probably sooner rather than later in the session. And then that will end up in subcommittees where people will also Iowans will have the opportunity to comment. I don't know how lengthy those are going to be. I know that while when they did the big state government reorganization, they had multiple subcommittees, but it still really wasn't enough time. And when you consider the depth and breadth of all of this, the other thing that was striking to me during the public comment and said to me they really hadn't done their homework properly was people who stood up and said, if you get rid of the volunteer commission, we're going to lose like millions of dollars in federal funds for volunteer programs here, for AmeriCorps. Really? I mean, do you really want to get rid of that altogether? So they did reverse that one, and they're now recommending that commission be shrunk to the minimum federal size, but it would still exist. Another one was the Midwestern Compact, which a couple of people got up and said, you can't actually get rid of it. That's something that we belong to as a state, and it's hugely valuable to community colleges, and we're sitting here in community college, and public schools, because it allows them to buy buy goods, books, paper, and so forth at a cut rate. And it's not like we could get rid of it because all these other states belong to it. It would just be a huge loss for our community colleges and schools. So they reversed that one too. And the people who got an A+ for organizing on September 6th were the athletic trainers, who pointed out time and again that you really want people who are well trained and who are licensed dealing with your kids, whether they're playing soccer or football or whatever they're playing. You don't want just somebody who says, "Hi, I can do this," and has no licensure. So I think they folded that in with something else. That was one of the things that they did a lot of folding in. We also met after this was all done. We met with interior designers. They're okay with being folded in with the architects as long as they have a representative on the board. So that's where we are now. We're waiting to see the legislation. I can tell you that it really did back up LSA because I'd been submitting, I assume you guys had been too, submitting bill after bill to be drafted, and it just wasn't getting done because they had this huge project to draft first. So I hope that I'm curious, I look forward to hearing what you have to say. I hope that Iowans, and I'm going to encourage them from my district as well, they show up and give their opinion. one of the ones that struck me, I used to be on the board of Shelter House in Iowa City, is they're doing away with the board on homelessness. And that's really the only voice these people have in the entire state. And if we're concerned about housing and getting people housed, that just doesn't seem to me to be the right direction to go. Another one they were going to eliminate but decided to keep is nursing home administrators. And we know what the situation is with nursing homes in the state. I would say they need to change that board so that there are various other stakeholders and not just the administrators on it. So that's about all I got for you. I'm happy to try and answer some questions, but thank you for having me. I would add one thing, and that was that if you're sort of looking at how flexible people were, they met every time. We always met on a Wednesday, except the last meeting, which turned out was going to be on a Monday, and that Monday was Yom Kippur. And so I asked them like 3 weeks in advance, do you think you could like move it one day, because literally half of the ex officio folks were oddly enough Jewish. No, they weren't going to move it. So we sent Senator Bisognano, who's the ranking member on state government in my place.
Representative James, do you have an opening comment you'd like to make?
No, I am here to listen, and am very eager to hear what comes, from you, specifically the areas, of your professions that you're representing or feel concerned about. I would have to say thank you for your incredible work on this. We've seen massive realignment, government realignment in the last session, and now this. And part of what I really resonated with in your presentation was a deeply flawed process, right? And so part of boards and commissions do offer transparency and accountability. And so when you're talking about those kinds of entities that are meant to put forward recommendations or put a check on any of our, government movements or other entities, it has to be a process that's thoughtful and calculated and in a way that ensures that Iowans are protected at the end of the day. And so thank you for being along this bumpy ride with us, and I also look forward to your comments.
I forgot like two key things. I'm sorry.
Yes.
One of their other recommendations were to get rid of the requirement for gender parity, which has been hugely controversial. It's been on the books since 1987. And they say, well, we want the best, most qualified people, blah, blah, blah. We can't find people. That's really disingenuous, because the way that works is if after a certain period you can't find someone, you can put anybody else on who's there. That's how it's worked, and it's really increased the numbers of boards and commissions that do have gender parity. And one positive thing was they want to increase the use of Zoom, so that people don't always have to travel to the meetings, to allow people to zoom into some of these meetings.
So it's not all negative, you're saying. There's some good things in there too. Just so you're aware, this won't be as Senator Weiner suggested, your only bite at the apple. One thing the Iowa House has that the Iowa Senate doesn't is, and I'm pretty sure, that there will be a call for a public hearing, which means for at least an hour and a half, people will be able to come to probably room 103 in the Capitol and speak. So if you can't make it, make sure that somebody who represents your point of view at the state level is aware that that opportunity will be coming, and be prepared when it does come. And probably one of the reasons we're really backed up is our best state government bill writer, Ed Cook, is retiring tomorrow. And he's probably the one who got that assignment. So we have a lot of new people in the legislature this year on the legislative drafting side, but they're all really good people, and they do a bang-up job to help us draft amendments to bills. So if you have ideas for amendments, maybe tonight is a night you could give us some of that information as well. So the first persons I'm going to ask to come up, there were some folks we invited personally and directly who do serve on a state board or commission. If some of you would like to come up maybe we could get a chair over there to kind of have a second in line and speak first to get us going. If you have a question you're going to ask, we're going to write down the questions and try to respond to them after everybody's had a chance to talk, so we make sure everybody has a chance to speak first. So, who here serves on a state board and commission? Step up to the plate, take your swings, and hit a couple triples and home runs.
Those of you that know me in here know I'm not shy, so I, will jump forward. Over the past...
Your name?
My name, is Bill Stumpf, S-T-U-M-P-F, and I live here in Dubuque. I have a 33-year-old son who has Down syndrome, so that's sort of how I got involved in a lot of things. So over the past 30 years, I've served on many boards, including the Early Access State Council, the DD Council, and Disability Rights Iowa more recently. Fortunately, those are mostly federally funded, so I don't think they're impacted by these. So that's a good thing. But the reason I bring it up is that the reason I was on every one of those boards was my lived experience, and you can't discount that. And that's the frustrating part for me mostly, is that if we eliminate some of the councils and commissions, we're going to lose some of those folks, because at the same time they're also talking about reducing the amount of members on each one. And one that I was impacted by once was I served on an advisory council for the Department of Public Health several years ago. It was the Patient-Centered Health Advisory Council, and I served on it because I was the rep for the DD Council, but when my term was up at the DD Council, they invited me and encouraged me to continue to go. So the funding for me kind of went down the tubes, but I felt so strongly about it that I went mostly on my own dime. They did give me some money for mileage. But it was always a rich meeting, and I used to be frustrated because I was like the only parent person there, but I also felt that that's why I needed to be there. And after a while, I really gained a lot of mutual respect for a lot of the professional people that were on there, and they listened to me too, truly listened. So I think that needs to be a key point. And I read in the report somewhere that the reason they want to eliminate some are because they want to get the most qualified people. Well, I want a clear definition of that, because being a family member may be the reason you're most qualified, not because you're necessarily, nothing against professionals that do great work, but you also need people that are in the trenches and live that experience. So thank you very much. Thank you all for being here.
Bill, could you tell us what DD Council stands for?
Oh, it's the Iowa Developmental Disabilities Council. It used to be known as the Governor's Planning Council, but the governor really didn't have anything to do with it, so they changed the name, but do amazing work. And one of the things that they're really good at are including people on their council that have intellectual and developmental disabilities. And not all councils do, but they do a really fantastic job with it. In fact, I think somebody right now with intellectual disability is their chair. So they believe in it. So thank you again.
Hello, I'm Natalie Weber. I serve on the PA licensing board. I've been physician assistant. I've been a PA in the state of Iowa since 2004. The last 7 years I have been educating future PAs at the University of Dubuque, and I have served on the licensing board for 2 years now. So it was part of the recommendations was that the PA board get housed underneath the Board of Medicine, be consolidated, and become a subcommittee for the under the Board of Medicine. And actually, historically, we at one time were a subcommittee under the Board of Medicine back in the 1970s. It did not go well. There was a lot of inefficiency, a lot of things that slowed down PA licensing. Also dealt with some anti-competitiveness issues on the board as well. And so in 1988, legislation passed that we would become our own independent board. So now with this recommendation to come back under the Board of Medicine, we have some concerns with that. We believe PA PAs are best regulated by PAs, people who know the profession. I can't imagine a physician would want us regulating their licensing either, or any other medical professional who does not go through the same schooling, doesn't know what the practice looks like, and would not have a better understanding of the scope of medicine that we do. HF 424 was just passed in last session, which removed the supervisory requirement. It was a huge step for PAs in the state of Iowa to bring more access. And as we sat on the board and wrote the rules for that, there were about 5 pages of added red tape from the Board of Medicine that were recommended to be added to that, which went completely against the governor's Executive Order 10 to remove the red tape. And if that's any indication of what's going to happen when we become a subcommittee, again, we have serious concerns with what that would look like and being able to provide care to patients and keep PAs in Iowa, as well as get them licensed in a timely manner. We believe that PAs should be afforded the same regulatory autonomy as both nursing and dentistry. Neither of those boards were recommended to be in subcommittees under the Board of Medicine. And I think, based on that and knowing that it's important to have your peers representing you and the profession through licensing, disciplinary action, is just going to be a key factor in keeping PAs in Iowa. We have about 1,300, and over 50% of them serve in rural communities, and we would hate to lose those PAs to other states where they just have a bigger voice there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Carla Anderson. I am the chair of the Human Rights Commission out here. I'm here to express my deep concern regarding the proposal to combine, cut, or completely eliminate state boards and commissions. A move that could have severe repercussions on our community's ability to address and rectify human rights violations. As a member of the Human Rights Commission and a staunch advocate for community welfare, I would like to outline 5 compelling reasons why this initiative is profoundly misguided. Number 1, undermining accessibility to complaint mechanisms. The Human Rights Commission serves as a vital avenue for community members to address grievances and file complaints related to human rights violations. Eliminating this entity will severely undermine the accessibility of a structured and impartial mechanism for individuals seeking justice. Number 2, erosion of accountability. We know how accountability is out here, right? It's costing taxpayers a lot of money right now. Pay attention. When you do not have accountability, we are not holding our public officials responsible. We've seen videos, we've talked to people. All of us in here know who's responsible for a lot of things that happens out here. Without an office like ours, it doesn't get heard. It might take a while when you come to us, but it does get heard. Eliminate our office, nothing. Number 3, disregard for diversity and inclusion. The Human Rights Commission, along with other boards, play a pivotal role in fostering diversity and inclusion. Eliminating such entities sends a message that the state is deprioritizing the protection of vulnerable communities and diminishing efforts to create an inclusive and equitable society. You know what diversity looks like out here, okay? I cover all the check boxes, black, female, and gay. I cover them all. I'm standing here. Number 4, loss of specialized expertise. I'm not saying we're specialists, but we do have a PhD that's with us. I think that qualifies us pretty well to take care of our community and make sure everyone is heard. Number 5, undermining the public trust in governance. We already don't trust. It's not something that we're born with not trusting. You come here, you just automatically stop trusting. No system has worked for one person every single time. The existence of state boards and commissions is a testament to the government's commitment to transparency and public engagement. Without the Human Rights Commission, we don't have that. What I'm asking is that consideration be kept to keep this commission, because we are the only one in the entire city that looks like the people in the city. We have everybody represented on our commission. I'd like to keep it that way. I'd like our voices to be amplified so that we can take care of what we said we came to take care of for our community.
My name is Rachel Waterhouse-Schwam. I am a freelance court reporter from here in Dubuque, Iowa. I'd first like to, before I forget, thank Representative Eisenhart and Representative James for setting this up, and Senator Weiner for coming tonight from Iowa City. Appreciate that. I personally was on the Iowa Board of Court Reporters Association board for 7 years, was president of that association from 2018 to 2019, past president 2019 to 2020, and then was asked to join the CSR board, which is Certified Shorthand Reporters. We're currently housed under the Office of Professional Regulation, and our concern is access to the judicial system and the transparency of that system are the cornerstones of our democracy. The life, liberty, and livelihood of Iowans depend on having access to the courts, and the court reporter is an integral part of that system. We provide overview to make sure that you have qualified, certified, licensed court reporters, because what we do is extraordinarily important, and I have the best job in the world. Get to work with people like Brian, and I see Chad, just kidding. I love my job. We're recruiting. We need butts in the seats. Anybody that wants to be a court reporter, come find me. I have a great job. The function of our board is to ensure that the court reporters have a level of skill necessary to make a verbatim record of court proceedings, and since there's not one here, I can talk as fast as I want tonight. My dad's an auctioneer, it runs in the family. We are responsible for administering the certification tests, which consist of skills and a written examination. The Iowa Supreme Court is responsible for establishing the rules and the appropriate standards for court reporters, as well as the disciplinary process. And the court also handles the appointments of members to our board and oversees its administration. It sounds like, from what we are hearing, we might be moved into the dial sector. They would not understand the specialization of our tests. We would like to, hopefully, if you're going to shift us out of OPR, move us under the judicial branch somewhere. I was at the September 6th public hearing but did not speak. And I'm curious for my question for you guys, the reasoning behind disbanding self-funded boards. We are self-funded. We cost Iowans $0. Our certification fees pay for the funding of our board. And I understand you're trying to reduce regulation and promote business, but I think that this big umbrella of that, there's so many different boards here, it doesn't apply to each equally. And so I'm curious what the reasoning is for why you're lumping everybody in one umbrella that just doesn't fit, I don't think. And we are, definitely just not one size fit all. So that would be my question is, when I was at the September meeting, there are a lot of self-funded boards that are on the chopping block. And so that's what I would like to the answer to. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Servillo, and I'm a certified professional midwife that practices out of Des Moines. So I apologize for my lateness. I had to drive 3.5 hours to get here.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I am also on the newly appointed Midwifery Advisory Committee that is also on the chopping block. But the problem is this was a bill that has been fought for over 10 years in order to happen. And the problem that we always run across is that they always think that certified professional midwives are the same as nurses. And we're not nurses. It's a completely different specialty. And when we proposed the bill, it was with the idea that we would have our own standalone board. That was obviously not a savings to the state. That was going to cost it a lot of money. So we compromised and said that we would be okay with being under the Board of Nursing as a compromise in order to cut costs. So we've already compromised to cut costs. And as long as we were still able to keep, you know, a board of peers and advise the nursing board at least that we were okay with that. So to completely do away with it kind of puts us in the same position as the PAs. It is absolutely going to create more regulation because nurses are a completely different specialization than what we do, and it will definitely cause, you know, a lot more red tape and a lot more probably cost in the long run, because those CPMs who we would hope would come here because we are a nice place, and CPMs will often treat people in rural areas because that does tend to be our specialty. That overregulation will prevent that from happening. So that's why I'm here today. So thank you.
Thank you.
So my name's Tom Townsend. I'm with the Electrical Workers Union. I serve on Iowa Economic Development Authority, but that's not really the board that I'm most concerned with in this whole process. They're trying to combine, it was already brought up, they want to eliminate the boiler board, they want to eliminate the elevator board. That's public safety stuff. I mean, it's insane. You know, then they also want to combine the plumbing, electrical, and building codes boards all together in one board. Currently, there are 28 people that serve on those 3 different boards. When they're done, they want 7. So they're taking a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge out of the room, and putting it in the hands of hand-picked people by the governor. You know, and we're very concerned about the public safety aspect of that. We also, the electrical board, the plumbing board, they're self-funded. They make more money off of electrical permits and to hire the inspectors and stuff than what they're making money, on it. So why to eliminate those boards really makes absolutely no sense. But the real concern is the amount of experience and knowledge that they're taking out of the room, and the hazard that they're potentially creating for the general public by eliminating so many of these positions. We've met with the governor's office, expressed our concerns. They don't want an inspector at the table. They didn't want an engineer at the table. I mean, it just makes absolutely no sense. We've actually done this in the city of Dubuque already. They combined the electrical, plumbing, and advisory appeals board into one. And I'll say it makes me very uncomfortable to be the guy there as an electrician that is given input on which plumbing codes we ought to be using, or which, is somebody's drainage right, or whatever if they appeal. I personally think the board in Dubuque is pretty dysfunctional because of that now. So I can only imagine how much worse that gets on a state level if they go through with this. So anyhow, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you all very much for your time.
Well, I wanted to say thank you for inviting me. I am Dr. Teresa Hughes. I'm a podiatrist here in Dubuque. I am speaking on behalf of myself. I'm not speaking on behalf of Medical Associates, the State Medical Society. So this is just my opinion, but here's what I would like to report to you today. First of all, what is a podiatrist? A podiatrist is a physician and a surgeon who focuses specifically on the foot and ankle. Doctors of podiatric medicine, DPMs, independently diagnose and treat conditions impacting the foot and ankle, have a full pharmaceutical prescribing license, and perform surgery. DPMs have the same number of years of education as DOs and MDs, and we do an undergraduate degree followed by 4 years of medical education and 3 years of residency. Some of us then go on to complete fellowship training and/or board certifications following their residency programs. Podiatrists can focus in many fields, including surgery, sports medicine, wound care, pediatrics, and diabetic care. Under the new proposal, they would like to take podiatry, just like the physician's assistants, and scoop us under the Board of Medicine without giving us any representation on the board. So just as the rest of you with plumbing and electrical and physician's assistants, I feel that we need to have podiatry represented. You don't want to come to the licensing board and have somebody that doesn't understand your training and your licensing to give licenses to people. Same with disciplinary actions. If they don't understand the job and what you're dealing with every day, for the people that specialize in that, how can they decide how to discipline, and just safety and health of patients. So the other thing that, one of the reasons that they wanted to do this was they talked about there would be cost savings and time savings. The Iowa Board of Podiatry right now meets quarterly, with most meetings lasting less than 2 hours. The Board of Medicine meets bi-monthly for 2 full days. Sometimes they have additional meetings in between. So it's hard to imagine that consolidation of the additional boards into the medicine is going to streamline that. It's going to make the meetings last longer. It's going to take more resources to run those meetings. Scope of practice issues. So under the proposed consolidation, podiatrists would assume an advisory role, effectively being a subcommittee of the Board of Medicine with absolutely no representation on the board. If there's a scope of practice conflict that arises, this is then going to actually probably go back to the legislature for solution. And this is what we're trying to avoid, is more work, and legislators don't want more work. We want the boards to take care of that for us. So the current system of separate boards allows practitioners to oversee each other who share their same expertise, experiences, as the people that they're overseeing. This deviates from national standards. There's only 3 states out of 53 states and territories that have adopted for an advisory board system for podiatrists. The proposed changes in Iowa deviate significantly from the prevailing approach. And then lastly, I just feel that, podiatrists deserve representation. If we are going to consolidate and this is going to happen, we at least need a seat on the board. So instead of being just an advisory role, who knows what does that mean? There's no definition of advisory, so doesn't mean that they have to come to you for anything. So at least if they're going to consolidate, they need to consider having people such as PAs and podiatrists have a seat at the board. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unlike Representative Eisenhart, my name is Brian Kane, by the way. I'm on the Iowa State Board of Education, finishing my 4th year. I spent about 36, 37 years on various boards of education. All Catholic school boards of education, from elementary school through high school, through the Archdiocese, through an interparochial school system we have in Dubuque now. When I was asked to join the State Board of Education, I had to confirm that I was male, that I was from Northeast Iowa, and that I had served on Catholic school boards. I'm apparently the token Catholic school board member. Just kidding. I've enjoyed all the time that I've served. Your questions in your invitation to me had to do with what's my experience been like on the State Board of Education, and what input would I have about this Executive Order 10 and the consolidation, elimination of the boards and commissions, and frankly, the streamlining of a tremendous amount of rules. This stack represents half, literally 1/2 of the rules the State Board of Education has gone through since August, under the direction of Director Mackenzie Snow and Counsel Thomas Mays. Every month through December, and we have another meeting next week, by the way, we meet about once a month, about 11 times a year. In between meetings, the meetings are all in Des Moines at the Grimes building. Usually it's 1 day, sometimes it's 2. I like to get up at 4 in the morning and drive to Des Moines, and then come home that night, because I have another job that I do during the day. But I would say that it's been a great experience. As you may know, we in conjunction with the Department of Education, develop rules and policies for public schools and accredited non-public schools. We oversee the AEAs, the community colleges, charter schools, educator licensure, para-educator licensure, and the education prep programs for those professionals. There's a lot to do. The proposal is that we would go from 10 members, including a student member, to 7 voting members. Under the proposed rules, I think it's fair to say that our duties are increasing. Code Chapter 256.7 sets out the duties of the State Board of Education. While that chapter won't grow, the things that we do are responsible for appears to increase. I was only kidding about this. I am a tree killer, though, and I apologize for that. But I'm old, so I like to touch and write on what I'm reading. I think, as far as the rules are concerned that govern the Department of Education and the State Board of Education, I think we're doing a good service without regard to the overall picture that many people are talking about tonight, because there were a great many rules. Sometimes the rules just would repeat what the statute said. Sometimes the rules would say something contrary to what the statute said, which is even worse. Sometimes the rules, you know how you do something 20 years ago and then you amend it 15 years ago and then you change things, and then time goes on and pretty soon you look at it and you go, geez, I don't even recognize this from where it started. Why? Or what's the question you folks hear all the time? I'm sure it is, why do we have this? I mean, to me, that's a failure. Why do we have this? If you have to ask, why do we have this rule? Then we don't need that rule. So we've spent a lot of time editing both substance and procedure to give people a fair chance. The State Board of Ed hears appeals all the time about school board decisions that get brought to that body, so we're quasi-judicial in that way. So I'm trying to stay in my lane tonight. I was invited as a member of the state board, so it's not my job to, you're the legislators. You have the unenviable task of passing laws or not, or amending them. But people that do what I do in carrying out what you adopt have to put that into something that can be used by everyone on a day-to-day basis. So we need to understand each other. So I guess what I would say is it's been a great learning experience. I think the people that are on the state board represent the entire state, all parts of the state. We need to continue that. I think there's all kinds of backgrounds. There's educators, superintendents, lay people like myself, but who have a love for education. I always say what's good for education is good for education. Doesn't matter. Everybody does well when we have good education programs in our state. So in answer to your first question, I've had a positive experience as a member of the State Board of Education. There's a little trepidation out there about how much more can a group of people do that meet a dozen times or so a year for a day or two or a day and a half at a time. It seems like the work is never finished, but I'm sure you all feel that way too. And I do think there is some positive things that are happening with regard to streamlining and editing and making rules more understandable for the citizens of our state. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, Didn't know I was going to be doing this, but I'm going to do it. My name is Jack Willie, and for 32 years I served on the Jackson County Board of Supervisors. And in the past, I served 9 years on the Mental Health Disability Service Council. 4 of those years I served as chairman, and it was at that time that we went from county services to regional services. And I really have to say that I'm happy we went to regions, because many of the services that we're required to provide now, Jackson County just could not have afforded. So being in a region, it's much, much better. And now that the state has taken over the funding, it's even better now, because the taxpayers of Jackson County are not having to pay a levy. I also served on the Human Service Council for 1 term, and I was appointed this spring to the Health and Human Service Council. Right now, our biggest job is reviewing all of the rules and regulations. And it is a much smaller board than the 2 boards that were previously running the show. And so I've learned a lot. I still have a lot to learn. But I guess one of the things that, if COVID didn't do anything else, it saved me a 3.5-hour drive going to Des Moines for our meetings, and a 3.5-hour drive home. So, but Zoom meetings are okay to conduct business, but you don't have the same input when it's a Zoom meeting. You just can't have that exchange of ideas and the conversations. So I really do prefer a face-to-face meeting, but that's not always possible, and it's not always necessary. But I think that the new Health and Human Service Council, we're really trying very hard to do the job that we're assigned, and I think that we'll see good things. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Todd Lang, and I serve on the Mental Health Planning Council, which will not be affected by this legislation. And Jack actually made a lot of great points I was just thinking of. But one thing that I'm concerned with is the general idea of representation. So the ability of people with lived experience, either mental health or substance use recovery, disability, and their family members to have a venue, and the ability to interface with state government and have an impact on public policy development. And my concern is with this idea of consolidation, that if we're eliminating or consolidating boards or commissions, we're going to lose the focus of some of these commissions and dilute it, and it'll get lost in the bigger picture. And Jack talked about COVID, and I think that was one bright spot that came out of COVID, was it accelerated the use of technology, the ability to connect remotely to meetings. It's helped me in my role infinitely, because I know if you're from Dubuque, you probably have made those 7-hour round trips, you know, to Des Moines when you have a busy schedule. That's hard to do. And also weather, right? Because if there's a storm that comes through, you know, that could wipe out your day and you can't go. So it seems like this is running counter to the opportunity we have with more civic engagement because of the improvements in technology. And lastly, specifically talking about the Mental Health and Disability Services Commission, which Jack referenced, you know, they do some important things with regard to the MHDS regions, approving the management plans, working with the Department of Health and Human Services, and also with the approval of community mental health centers. Those are just 2 very tangible examples of some of the work that they do. And I think there's a recommendation that that MHDS commission would be consolidated. So I'm just concerned about the effect that would have on the MHDS region. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Katie Kopp. I'm a psychologist. I'm licensed in the state of Iowa. And I wanted to kind of strike while the iron was hot, because he's talking about mental health and the effects of consolidation and that kind of thing. So the proposal right now is for consolidation of the Board of Behavioral Science, Psychology, and Social Work to become one. And I have a lot of concerns about the loss of kind of the integrity if we were to consolidate those boards. a loss of input. Right now our board consists of 5 psychologists, and there's differentiation for those who specialize in research, clinical practice, academic settings, and so we get input from all those different psychologists when they're reviewing these issues, as well as members of the public then. I assume with a consolidated board we would have maybe 1 or 2 members representing psychology, and so, you know, I think no matter what you do, you probably wouldn't want to pick any one person to represent all of your profession to kind of speak for you. So I think it's beneficial for everybody to have that multiple input when they're reviewing for licenses and credentialing and that kind of thing. You know, so we're really looking at 4 different professions under the umbrella of mental health who would fall under one board. I think it would become probably much more arduous to serve on that board. And of course, these are volunteer positions, and right now it's about 4 hours, I believe quarterly, so 4 hours every 3 months. And assuming that's going to be more meetings and more time that's required, that's a hard thing for a clinician. We're already, I don't know if you've heard, there's a mental health crisis. So we're in high demand, and so giving up more time that we could be spending providing clinical care to sit in administrative meetings is not serving us, it's not serving the public. And so I'm concerned about that as well. And then also to serve on that board, then I have to, you know, I would have to learn the regulations of all these other professions. We all have different licensing exams and ethics codes and all that kind of stuff. So it just seems like it would really deter people from wanting to serve on the board, whereas right now we have no problems with recruitment. The board has been, all of our positions have been full for at least most of the last 10 years. So that's just a couple of the issues that I wanted to highlight. So, thank you.
I'm Nicole Keaty. I'm also a psychologist, and I do want to thank you for inviting us to speak to you. It's good to have the opportunity. And I also do not speak on behalf of medical associates. I did, however, get some of these points in consultation with the advocacy team from the Iowa Psychological Association. So one of the primary goals of boards and commissions is to protect the public. I think that is the overarching goal. And if they consolidate as proposed these 5 different groups into this one consolidated board, and they're trying to become more efficient, we would only by necessity lose some of the standards that we have to protect the public. We wouldn't have the ability for all of the people on the board to specifically understand the specialty of the person who's presenting to them to be licensed, or who's presenting to them with a disciplinary action. There would be people there who do not understand the scope of practice of all the different people they would be helping make major decisions for. And we can't really expect the public to know what training and ethics are required for each of these specialties. We really need the boards to know that for them when they give a license, and I just think we would lose so much specialized knowledge of what their different scopes of practice are. If we want to preserve trust from the public, if we want to preserve trust from employers who employ the people who have these licenses, we need to maintain specialized boards based on the unique requirements, the unique scope, the unique competencies that are required by each of these. We're very different specialties. Even though the public sometimes doesn't know all the differences, we certainly do know our differences, and we need our boards to know the differences between us. And currently, our boards, social work board, the behavioral science board, the psychology board, they collaborate really well. They work together even in terms of advocating against this consolidation. But if we combine them and then there comes a scope of practice issue, for example, before this consolidated board, I think that that would be tough to maintain separate perspectives and to collaborate effectively. And I think that this is relevant for all of these different consolidations of other professions that are being proposed. So we need the distinct entities to be able to collaborate and have their voices without fighting within one board. And let's see here. One of the things that I think is really important, and I believe Dr. Hughes referred to this, professional autonomy is very important. And if we want to recruit psychologists to this state, they need to be able to maintain their professional autonomy. And the consolidated board, I think, would help kind of dilute perception that we would have that professional autonomy, and we really need to recruit psychologists. We really need to recruit licensed mental health counselors to this state. We don't need to make that harder. So thank you for your time.
Okay, I know somebody's debating whether to jump out of their seat.
I don't want to walk off over there.
If you could, honestly, if you could, because we're actually recording and it'll be helpful for us. Thank you. Big favor for me.
Okay, I'm Eileen Fisher. I'm from Solon, Iowa. And I'm here because I'm a passionate tobacco prevention parent, mom, and sister. My oldest sister passed away from cancer when she was 45. That would have made me about 11, and she started smoking when she was 17. So when my 17-year-old son started smoking, I just went ballistic. How can you do that? And he said, Mom, just because I smoke one cigar doesn't mean I'm going to be a smoker. And then he smoked for 8 years. So because of that, I started a group called Clean Air for Everyone, which we call CAFE, and we advocate for tobacco prevention and control across the state. We work to help pass the $1 tobacco tax, which is the most effective thing you can do to stop tobacco use is increase the price. And then the next year that was followed by the Smoke-Free Air Act, which I hope that you have all enjoyed that. So when the tobacco settlement dollars came to the state created the Tobacco Commission. And we've had international leaders in tobacco prevention serve on that. Dr. Chris Squire. I don't know that Iowa really appreciates or knows the expertise of the people who work and do that work for all of us. And the state still gets over $50 million a year from the tobacco settlement dollars, plus the money from tobacco taxes. And Iowa would lose that. If you do away with the Tobacco Commission, we would lose all that expertise and the people who have the passion. They're not doing it for money, as all the rest of you people who serve on boards know. They're doing it because they care about people. They care about Iowa kids. They care about not just theirs, but all Iowa youth. And we have an epidemic of vaping now in junior high. I mean, I don't know if there's a high school principal on the Tobacco Commission, but there should be, because they can tell you how much money they've had to spend to put monitors in the bathrooms. They can show you the drawers full of the little vape cartridges that they confiscate every day. And we need that commission. And I don't want us to lose that. I care too much about now my grandchildren. Right. Those tobacco companies lie to you. Don't fall for it. But I would just ask you to do whatever you can to save that commission, and actually all of these commissions. It's just ridiculous that we haven't spent a more thoughtful process and gotten more input from Iowans before we take this step. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming to Solon.
My name is Sue Whitty, and I'm a retired psych mental health nurse practitioner. And a couple of things I want to repeat and reinforce. I think some of what I believe has been stated here tonight, but yes, it should have been a thoughtful, meticulous, careful, professional process. Many of the boards and commissions do promote public health, public safety, and many of the boards and commissions protect public health and public safety. So on page 32, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth bullet of page 32, of the document, board membership. This is an erroneous assumption. Licensing boards commonly require a certain percentage of its members to be an individual holding a license regulated by the board. However, in the case of licensing board regulating multiple licenses, boards generally do not need representative of less, and what is less, advanced license practice types. Individuals holding a more advanced license type are sufficiently equipped to regulate those licensees and protect the public. I think what you've heard here tonight is there's many people who don't believe that to be true, that every profession takes their profession very seriously, does the best they can, and wants to be thorough and complete in their process. And I heard a few points made tonight that I hadn't thought of. In some of my boards that I serve on, some of my advocacy groups, we've talked about some of the impact of this document. And I can't imagine how large this bill is going to be. And I can't imagine how we can carefully look through every little piece. So please, would you let us know when this bill is ready, which committee it's going to go to, and who are the members of that committee, so we can appropriately inundate them with emails. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for organizing this. My name is Jane Drappel. I'm the CEO of HACAP, the local community action agency. And I would just like to share with you one recommendation that's been made is that the Community Action Commission be eliminated. It's a statewide commission that provides guidance to the 16 community action agencies in the state. But more importantly, that commission is made up of a tripartite membership. It has elected officials on it, it has private individuals, and it has consumers of community action agencies representing low-income populations. The elimination of this commission takes away that consumer representation at a statewide level, and we believe that's important. People that receive services should have the opportunity to share and give their guidance as to what really works to make a difference in their lives. So we believe that the commission is going to be gone. We wish that it were not. So if there's anything you can do to resurrect that, we would appreciate that. But in the absence of that, keeping a consumer voice is important. So I would ask that you look at the membership on the Health and Human Services Oversight Board and put somebody with lived experience and representative of the low-income population there. Thank you.
Others?
I'll be brief. I'm Nick Hockenberry. I serve on the Northeast Iowa Workforce Development Board, one of the handful of workforce development boards throughout the state of Iowa that administer federal workforce funds that are authorized through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. One of the recommendations is quite vague, but it suggests the consolidation of the regions for the purpose of efficiencies of those federal dollars. I think one of the important aspects that our board takes very serious is ensuring that the use of those funds is most appropriate for the region in which we represent, which is Northeast Iowa, which is pretty darn big as it stands right now. So it's from Dubuque to Mason City. Previously, I think it was, Jack, was it 3 years ago? 3 years ago, there was already a reorganization of all of the workforce development areas throughout the state, consolidating many of them, which is why our current region is larger. That was a very painful process. So those of us who went through it and have a memory of reorganizing, drawing new lines, creating partnerships and collaborations from all of the different organizations that need to work in workforce development, that doesn't sound very fun. I think the other part of that is the efficiencies argument. I I don't think holds a ton of water. There's not a cost savings to the state that I'm aware of, since these are federal workforce dollars as well. I think the important aspect here from the local workforce boards is that local control is the best way to align these workforce dollars, federal workforce dollars in the region.
So Representative James has heard me say a number of times that the people who show up and speak up are the ones who are going to get the attention. So folks who've spoken up are the ones that I'm going to speak up for. We'll amplify your voices. Yes. So if you haven't spoken up in behalf of your field of endeavor, here's your chance to get on our radar screen. So one last chance for anybody who hasn't had a chance to speak to a unique topic.
Jack Willie again. As a member of the Board of Supervisors, we serve on lots of boards and commissions. And the one that I have been on, was on for 32 years, was the Early Childhood Iowa. And it's so important that those children have the opportunity. Their brain develops the most when they're young. So we really need to keep ECI and the job that they're doing. I mean, ours is just Clinton and Jackson County. And it's just amazing what we've accomplished. And I think there's not a child in Clinton or Jackson County that's not a part of the Dolly Parton Imaginary Library, because we make sure that we get their names and we get them enrolled. So please keep them viable and important to those kids.
So my name is Dave Heyer, and I do not serve on a state board or commission. However, I've worked in local government for 44 years and am now retired and volunteering in local government and other organizations. And one of the things that I've taken pride in during that time is being open to the public, making them informed of how decisions are made and asking for their feedback or input. Of course, all of the groups that I've worked with are covered by the open meetings law, and so we comply with making sure those meetings are open to the public. What I'm hearing you say as you describe this process is that it hasn't necessarily been open to the public, and that in some cases subcommittees were set up maybe specifically to avoid having public meetings. And let me just share my recent experience working on a committee for the city, a 9-member commission, and we set up a subcommittee of 3 people, not to avoid the open meetings law, but because we just felt we needed somebody to work on something that they could bring back to the full commission. But we were told by the city attorney, that's an open meeting. Even though there's only 3 members present, that's still an open meeting. You need to invite the press. So we did. But, you know, that kind of transparency and open kind of thing is what I think makes for good government. And what I see happening, not just with this, but just state government in general, is that open meetings laws don't seem to apply to the state. They just apply to the counties, to the schools, to the cities, other local governments. And that really does need to change. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Mike Fidgen. I'm a citizen of Dubuque County. I've been in Dubuque for 3.5 years now, moved here from Virginia. I'm also the CEO of Hillcrest, and therefore have a great interest in community-based mental health. I'm kind of taking Chuck up on his challenge here to speak up or not be supported. So, but I'm on a steep learning curve here. Prior to my life in Iowa, I spent 23 years with a large multi-site, multinational, multi-state company in mental behavioral health. It was a for-profit, publicly traded company. I'm now with a very large, tenured, 127-year-old not-for-profit. So I've been listening here, and I think I really appreciate what I've heard those both publicly and professionally say about their concerns, and I think everybody deserves that sort of representation and advocacy for the disenfranchised, and that's probably what I'm. With the little time I want to take up here, it would be not as much about, I serve on the Mental Health and Disability Services Commission. I'm coming up on a year, so don't hold me accountable for anything good or bad that's happening, as much as I think very highly of the group of experts that have been brought together, and I think are doing a great service across Iowa with that commission. Also locally have been serving on Dubuque Public Health, Board of Health for about 15 months now. It's been a great experience, and there are just a lot of people that are well qualified but limited when you look at the entire scope of work that needs to be done. So all the comments that have been made about diluting expertise and not having people have voices and losing any of that, I agree with. I'm also not a big government kind of guy, right? I also sit in meetings, and there are times where the redundancy and the siloed nature, and my God, I've lived in this meeting for 30 years now, and it's like the soap opera where the person in the coffin, died 20 seasons ago, and we're having the same conversation, eating the same boring food and drinking the same boring drinks, right? And nothing ever gets solved. So I'm okay with systems change, but I'm not a systems engineer, right? So the thing I would say, the population I'm most concerned about in my short time here in Dubuque, in the context of what I understand, which is limited, that's going on here, is the homeless. And I just think we've got a group they don't have lobbyists behind them, they don't have special interest. There are people dealing with substance abuse, there are people dealing with economic hardship, there are people dealing with health and substance use and abuse issues, and they're just so underrepresented and underserved, and they're super at risk, and they're no one group's problem. They're not the problem of your homeless services group any more than they're the problem of the sheriff's department or the jails or community service or outreach or any of you that pass them on the street at any given moment, because but for the grace of God go each of us, right? If you start to really look at our homeless population, it's not the homeless population from 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It's people like you and me that had a couple bad knocks and are experiencing things that they never knew they were going to have to deal with, and never thought about what's life going to be like without health insurance, or needing to get a job when I've had one for 25 years, or letting my wife or my kids down and being suicidal. So I really, for those of you that are really actively involved, and we have actively involved people at Hillcrest doing this work, but they're doing it largely out of the goodness of their heart, because I know what I pay them, what Hillcrest pays them. It's not a living wage. It's a fractional position to work with many other community folks that are in the same place, working with organizations and committees and groups that don't have enough funding to lend the shirt off their backs to these people, but that's what our people are doing. So, I'd like to see whatever we do, bring them up the priority ladder. So thank you.
So what I'd like to do now, I'm sure we've all kept good notes, and start with Senator Weiner. If she has any feedback, or I didn't hear a whole lot of questions in there, but there may be some clarifications or amplifications you have for us.
Really grateful to everyone for speaking up. It's incredibly helpful, and everybody in the legislature needs to hear it. I can tell you this will be before the state government committees in the House and in the Senate. They will have people assigned to the subcommittees, and the subcommittees is where you can talk. And they have used different platforms, but in addition to the public meeting you're talking about, Representative Eisenhart, but we use different platforms, but you don't have to be there in Des Moines to give your 2 or 3 minutes worth. You can do it online.
And just to follow up with that comment, there are legislators in our area who are not present here tonight that also need to hear these comments. And so, you know, especially those of you who have already written comments, if you can send those to local legislators who are not here, that's a really important thing. And I know Senator Pam Yoakum, who represents the city of Dubuque, had another work commitment tonight and could not be here, and you know, has had a child with a disability, and so she's very well aware of all of the concerns bubbling up. But it doesn't hurt even just to send her a note as well with your particular story.
Is that the extent of your comment?
Yeah. It was brief. It surprised you.
No. Just gotta fill it.
Surprising my colleague over here. Yes, yes.
Yeah, I made a few. Another comment, please.
Well, no, I have a question.
Okay.
In the logistics and the schedule of all this, you know, it started last session, you know, with this whole idea of, you know, eliminating, combining and everything, and then we had the meetings in this summer. Is this all, I mean, all of these ideas going to go into one bill? You're kidding.
So the government reorganization last session was a 1,600-page bill.
Right, but I couldn't believe even then that it's, I mean, how can you take all these diverse and different boards and commissions and put it all in one bill? Well, I hope failure is built in then.
Yeah. I do think, here's a comment. Oh, Chuck, I'm taking it back. I do think that, you know, we never should be afraid of, you know, doing the work of looking at our systems and structures and, you know, sharpening and, you know, getting better. But the way in which we go about doing that is with public input, heavy public input from the professions in particular and the people who are going to be dramatically impacted, not through, you know, quick legislation shoved, you know, 1,600 pages worth of government reorganization that, you know, we had, you know, days, very few days to really process and look through. So yes, yeah. Okay, now I'll be quiet. So.
Well, I mean, I think if you speak on a larger plane of what the motivations are behind this, I will just bring your attention to the postcard I handed out titled Streamlining Government or Attack on Democracy. In the public promotion of this, I softened that up a bit and said, are we shutting citizens out? And I think the testimony here shows that that's true. That's the big fear, that we're going to make it harder for people to have involvement in self-government, which is what democracy is all about. But a bigger concern that I think we need to look at is the potential for consolidation of power in one branch of government, and this part of a broader strategy. State government reorganization was one of them, collapsing many tasks under one hat, under one roof, where it makes it that much harder to track, and frankly that much harder for even the employees to manage effectively. And what happens when you mismanage your responsibilities? You give people a bad taste about government, right? Now it's, there you go. Government doesn't know what it's doing. How do we address that? Get rid of it altogether? So I think that's, judging from what we've seen elsewhere in the country over the last, say, 8 years, or maybe the last 12, we have to question whether, how much this is part of a broader intention, and not just a matter of making government more efficient and more effective. And so, regardless of your point of view, from a practical standpoint, how do we deal with that? I think that's something that we need to think about. We might not have a whole lot of time. I think 1,600-page bills make it that much harder for people to have a voice. You know, it's like everything's a moving target, and the compressed time frame makes it harder for any one of you or your professions, much less homeless folks who don't have a voice to begin with, for their voices to matter. So I think that whole notion of, do we want self-government, or is the assumption in this report accurate, where it describes boards and commissions, advisory committees, as some type of fourth branch of government that somehow steals power and authority and responsibility from the other three branches in the Constitution? I think that's a wrong-headed way, personally, of looking at it altogether. And I think one of the major issues we face with the disappearance of venues for people to make a difference. One thing you'll see on the agenda of every board and commission, whether it's city, county, state, is public comment. And if the board doesn't exist, the average person's opportunity to just show up and make a public comment and get an issue on the radar screen disappears altogether. And I think that's as problematic as anything about eliminating many of these entities. So again, what can we do going forward? I can tell you that if you didn't speak up, I'm going to be visiting with folks at 8:30 Saturday morning, part of my Legislative Service Center at Convivium Urban Farmstead, 8:30 to 10. You're welcome to join me, Representative James, if you'd like. If you didn't want to speak in public, I'll be your audience of one if you'd like. There's an opportunity to write letters to the editor. I think we're going to make this video available to other legislators. It'll probably be online, the Iowa House Democratic webpage, which we will certainly make you aware of if you've signed up on the form outside with your email address. You'll get all of that follow-up and feedback from us, and we would make you directly, personally aware of the meetings that are going to be happening once the legislature convenes. But think about what you can do to continue speaking up, and that is a letter to the editor. If you have some titles and multiple people as authors, you know, the editor of the paper may give you one of those 500-word columns if you want to go into greater detail, and link up with other folks around the state who you already know in many cases, who are willing to do the same thing in their own local newspapers. And I especially encourage folks who represent folks practicing in rural Iowa or speaking for constituencies in rural Iowa to make sure those rural newspapers also get a chance to speak up. So with that, any other final comments for the good of the cause? Thank you all for coming. We'll stick around for a few more minutes if you'd like to speak with us. And Happy New Year.